There I am. Hi. I assume there is someone out there reading what is happening to me in a comic book right now, which is why I'm narrating all of this in my head. I bet you're curious what my deal is, but I'm afraid you're not getting my origin today. Today, on the Comic Book Report, the Gwenpool Omnibus from Marvel Comics. Stick around and check it out. Greetings all, my name is Dominic and today you're tuning in to the Comic Book Report, where we review comic books and graphic novels so you can get an idea of what to read. And today I have a really interesting title. Of course, I'm talking about the Gwenpool Omnibus, brought to us by Marvel Comics. Gwenpool has been a character I've been aware has kind of permeated comic book pop culture the last few years, but admittedly I had never had an opportunity to really read any of her comics outside of her appearance in Chip Zdarsky's Howard the Duck. So getting this omnibus recently, I was super ecstatic to finally give this character a shot. And I can't wait to review this omnibus today. But before we do, a quick shout out to our channel sponsor, OrganicPriceBooks.com. If you're looking to pick up your own comic book collected editions, definitely check out their website in my description. You can use my code, TheComicBookReport, at checkout to receive $2 off of your order. Please note if you use my affiliate code or link to make a purchase, I will earn a small commission, but it's a great way to support the channel. Now on with the show. First, some quick facts about today's collection. The issues in this volume were written primarily by Christopher Hastings, Kelly Thompson, and Leah Williams, and illustrated primarily by Guru Hiru, Irene Strachowski, and Stefano Caselli. The comics in this volume were published by Marvel Comics beginning in 2015. The volume itself collects the Unbelievable Gwenpool issues 1 through 25, Rocket Raccoon and Groot issues 8 through 10, Champions issue 5, Edge of Venomverse issue 2, West Coast Avengers issues 1 through 10, Superior Spider-Man issues 7 and 8, Gwenpool Strikes Back issues 1 through 5, and material from Howard the Duck issues 1 through 3, Gwenpool Special issue 1, Gwenpool Holiday Special Merry Mix-Up, and Secret Empire Brave New World Not Brand Ek issue 14. And finally, this oversized hardcover edition comes with a nice sewn binding, glossy print paper stock, and 1,184 pages. At this time, I'd like to issue a general spoiler warning. I will be flipping through the contents of today's collection and commenting on plot points throughout. You've been advised. Okay, and now here's our look at that omnibus collection from Marvel Comics. I'll note right from the jump that I do have the direct market cover for this omnibus that includes the first cover appearance of the character of Gwenpool. There was a standard edition cover for this omnibus, of course. I'll throw up a snippet so you can compare the two. Overall, I think both covers are fantastic for this book and showcase something unique about the character. As we make our way to the back of the dust jacket, you can see more art that is pretty indicative of what you can expect inside this omnibus. There is an almost manga anime-like quality to the character design of Gwenpool, but it really fits the character, and overall I think the art in this book is outstanding. As we take kind of a closer look at the dust jacket, I will say it is surprising with so many kind of pink colors and motifs throughout the book. I'm surprised they went for purple for the predominant dust jacket cover for this direct market edition, but I do think the purple is quite striking and it looks good on the bookcase. At any rate, I did want to give you one last look at the dust jacket, of course with the interior flaps, so you can see just the full presentation of the dust jacket itself, at least for this direct market cover. Like I said, I think it's very stylish and cool and gives you a good sense of what you can expect on the inside of this book. And just a couple more seconds on that dust jacket, and then we're going to go ahead and transition over to the hardback art we actually have on the book itself. I love when Marvel and DC and these other publishers have been doing this, giving us art underneath the dust jacket itself, just stamped on the hardback book. The image we have for that here is actually a wraparound image that is taken directly from one of the issues in this collection. A pretty pivotal moment between Gwenpool and Doctor Strange. I'm sure I'll cover that in a little bit here, but it is a really interesting choice, and I think it's very striking. I do like to see the wraparound image, really cool stuff. A lot of great coloring here on this cover, and just generally in this series. It's so eye-popping and vibrant, and you'll definitely see more as I flip through the collection itself here in a moment. Now, I do want to take a couple seconds here and just examine that sewn binding I mentioned earlier. I have to say, with some of these bigger omnibuses, especially from Marvel, I've really been impressed by the binding lately. I feel like we've been getting a lot of books with really great eyes that lay out pretty well, all things considered. You'll see as I flip through the book to see if there's any gutter loss that you think is unacceptable. I, for one, thought it was great. I thought it laid open well, and I had no problems with it in general. Great job, Marvel, with this print. No complaints from me. Okay, and now going into the collection proper, we have some nice pink end pages and some pink title pages, publication information. Then we have kind of their table of contents. Of course, we don't have page numbers with this modern omnibus, but it kind of maps all the different creators throughout these different series and the run itself, and it's done in the order it's presented in the book, which I kind of like. It kind of feels sort of like a table of contents, even without the page numbers. After that, we have the Chris Bachalo cover. So interestingly enough about Gwenpool, her first appearance was actually in a variant cover for a series called Deadpool's Secret Wars, and it was during a time when Gwen Stacy's Spider-Gwen, Ghost Spider became so popular that a lot of the other Marvel books were doing Gwen Stacy variant covers of different series, kind of doing amalgam characters if Gwen Stacy was this character or that character. Well, of course, Chris Bachalo did a cross between Gwen Stacy and Deadpool, giving us that image of Gwenpool on the raft there. And anecdotally, that's really what kicked off this character. That image was so popular on that one variant cover appearance that this character was getting cosplayed and showing up all over the place. And I guess Marvel thought this was enough interest to go ahead and give her actual comic book appearances. We have her showing up in Howard the Duck, I believe in kind of backup stories during that Chip Zdarsky run, and then showing up in her own special before landing her own solo series with the Unbelievable Gwenpool. Before we go too much further into some of the plot lines and the examination of the artwork, I do want to do a little bit more of a primer for the character of Gwenpool, because if you're like me, you might be asking, who the heck is Gwenpool? What is this about? What's kind of her deal or gimmick or what have you? If you're like me, you might falsely assume, just seeing her costume and getting her name, that this is some kind of relation to Gwen Stacy or even the character of Deadpool. And actually, both are false. She's not in any way really related to either character. No, this character's name is actually Gwendolyn Poole with an E at the end, so that's her name, Gwenpool. But basically, she is from our world, presumably, the real world, where Marvel Comics characters are just that, characters within comic books. Somehow, through some kind of indeterminate origin, she finds her way into the Marvel 616 universe. She crosses that dimensional barrier, and now she finds herself a comic book character. But interestingly enough, she now has all this trivia knowledge about the Marvel universe, having been a big superfan. So she knows secret identities, histories, backstories, locations, things like that these other Marvel heroes don't know. Because of that as well, she's able to also break the fourth wall, being aware that she's in a comic book, kind of like Deadpool in the way he breaks the fourth wall. However, she has much more of an expansive knowledge base because she breaks the fourth wall, because she's from our world. So that's an interesting wrinkle on that convention of the kind of fourth wall breaking character. As far as how she looks kind of like Deadpool, she went to kind of a costumer to get her own sort of superhero costume. On the name slip, she wrote Gwenpool because that's her name. The costumer mistook this to be a request for kind of a derivative of the Deadpool costume, and that's how this Gwenpool costume is created, and that's why it looks so reminiscent of the Deadpool style. As far as superpowers go, in the beginning, she does not have really any to be heard of. She does break the fourth wall and does have this really wide knowledge of the Marvel Universe, but she has no real power to speak of, and in fact her combat and physical kind of proficiency is pretty lacking in the beginning. She doesn't really have any training, any notable skills really, and she has kind of this manic energy. She's kind of an interesting character, sort of eccentric, and she finds herself with a lot of high-powered weaponry, and she again is very zany. In these first appearances, she almost treats the Marvel Universe like some gamers might treat playing something like Grand Theft Auto for the first time. You're in this sandbox environment where there doesn't feel like there's any sense of responsibility or stakes, so you can just let the chaos fly if that is kind of your bent and personality type. And that's what we see at the beginning. She lives kind of frivolously and violently in this sort of chaotic sandbox that she feels has no real sense of stakes, because all these characters aren't real, right? But throughout those earlier appearances, we do kind of see her develop a sense of compassion as she actually cares for the characters within this universe. We also see her slowly throughout this book get trained up, get better combat proficiency, I should say. And so that's a really interesting development we have. And also another wrinkle we have throughout this book, and we get to this, towards the middle end of the actual run of the Unbelievable Gwenpool, she does develop a sense of powers. She does kind of figure it out to an extent. Her powers surround the breaking the fourth wall ideal, but to a much more interesting extent than we get with a character like Deadpool, in that she can manipulate the panels, comic book pages, jump out of them completely, throw objects through them, drop characters out of panels, go through sort of timing with panels, things like that. She can just completely break the construct of the comic book she is bound in. She can interact with the narrative bubbles. And again, we see this toward the end of her run, and it's something that's so creative and interesting. I would have wished it was implemented earlier in the series. Her power also seems a bit inconsistent because after she develops those powers in her own series, she seems to lose them or not be able to access them when we have her in appearances in West Coast Avengers. At any rate, just a really interesting character. But that's kind of a primer and an idea of who she is, where she came from, why she is the way she is, and what powers she may or may not have throughout this run. Okay, and with that foundational primer out of the way for this character, let's go ahead and talk about some of the storylines you can find throughout this book. So like I said, she first appeared in that Chris Bocciolo cover before getting some appearances in Howard the Duck from Chip Zdarsky. I covered that a bit when I reviewed that title on the channel. I would say it's definitely really eye-opening reading that now that I've read so much more about Gwenpool. I do think that early appearance in Howard the Duck is not even that indicative of what you can expect from the character in her own solo series. In that solo series, she's much more warm, she feels much more like a real character, and while she's still kind of zany and manic, there is a lot more heart and personality there that's a lot easier to identify with than what we had seen from her in Howard the Duck. We have a little bit of a Christmas special that I found to be a little bit unremarkable, but it was nice to see her interact with even more Marvel characters. And then we dive right into the Unbelievable Gwenpool. And in the beginning, like I said, she's kind of running rampant. She found all these high-powered weapons, and she's kind of living very, very recklessly and chaotically. Part of her justification, too, over the fact that there is no sense of stakes, she doesn't believe these characters are real, and because she's in her own solo book, she really doesn't think she's going to get injured or killed or anything really bad's going to happen to her because she's the primary protagonist. So that leads and kind of feeds into all that sense of chaos. But at the end of the first issue, we actually have someone she befriends get killed in front of her, and she feels personally responsible, and she's deeply affected by it. We also have her essentially becoming a henchman for the character MODOK in spite of her best intentions or hopes, and she kind of realizes, like, oh no, I'm not really like a superhero or main anti-hero kind of character, I'm just sort of some weird henchman. And because of that, it really kind of grounds her so that even by the second, third issue, she takes things much more seriously overall. She really feels like there's a sense of weight to some of her decisions, and she sees some of these characters as more, real people. Interestingly enough, though, while she's a henchman for MODOK, she meets some of the fellow henchmen, and their characters like Batroc the Leaper from the Captain America franchise, a really lesser-known villain. We also have a couple other characters that I believe were created by Christopher Hastings to kind of fill out the roster of supporting characters in this Gwenpool mythos. They're all kind of no-name characters. I mean, they have a name, but they're not really known before this, and I don't know that a ton has been done with them outside of Gwenpool, but it fills out the cast nicely. One of the characters is sort of a zany psychic character. Another is sort of like a healer, doctor, eccentric character. And then we actually have the character friend of hers that was murdered in the first issue coming back as kind of a ghost. His name is Cecil. And that really rounds out some of her primary cast of allies in her own solo series. And basically one of the first things that happens in that series is she basically takes down MODOK and kind of triumphs in this interesting situation so that she's kind of elevated to the villainous leader of this little sub-organization. We find out that she's working looking for this character that really hates comic book violence or even comic book heroes and just wants a really normal world. This guy actually is, we find out, he's actually a Doom bot that kind of defected from Latveria and became this person, was given skin, and just wanted things to be normal. He's outed as a Doom bot though, so he kind of becomes the thing he doesn't like. He ends up on the news, there's all sorts of chaos ensuing. And after that point, the Gwenpool character and her supporting cast here are just kind of floating around, doing random things. Gwenpool does want to be more of a hero, kind of find her place and identity within the Marvel Universe, so we have her sort of jumping from adventure to adventure where she tries to play hero, but things either go wrong or they end up kind of as misadventures. She always leans a bit too violently, and there is still some of that early feel where she just goes a little bit too hard and too manically for a lot of the Marvel characters. So we see her get into a lot of different conflicts with characters like Miles Morales' Spider-Man. We have some kind of conflicts and issues with Miss Marvel at one point. She meets Kate Bishop Hawkeye, Jane Foster's Thor. We have a couple kind of issues from the Rocket Raccoon and Groot series that she directly impacts. That's a really fun little adventure where Captain Marvel sort of reluctantly dispatches Rocket Raccoon and Groot to this place on Earth to pick up some kind of item, but they have an ulterior motive and mission to basically hunt down this one guy. And Gwenpool's sort of on a collision course with them. She's also trying to get whatever object they're after, and the three of them kind of make an interesting, weird team. This ends up being kind of a really goofy, kind of science fiction-y alien action series, but it's a really fun, like just 3 issues, and it was really cool to see her cross over with some of these Guardians of the Galaxy characters. It was just a really interesting little crossover. Early in this Gwenpool series as well, we have her interact with Doctor Strange, who basically pulls the vestiges of her reality, or her ties to the real world out, and kind of gives her enough in this mainstream Marvel universe, like gives her social security, a bank account, and this feeling like she was always here for the rest of the people, and that kind of helps her establish an identity in the 616 universe. But everyone still thinks she's a little bit crazy. Whenever she refers to the fact that everyone's in a comic book, they kind of dismiss her or treat her like she's out of her mind. And she kind of leans into that in different ways, but she also feels a little bit alienated by that, and that's something that we see teased out throughout the issues. Throughout this run as well, we have her cross over with Deadpool. That was a long-awaited kind of meetup, at least for me, and it was interesting to see them kind of battle with fourth wall instances and just character relevancy and things like that. I think it was a really fun take on both of the characters, and I felt like it was absolutely inevitable in a series like this that we had those characters meeting. There's honestly so many fun stories in here to cover. I'm just kind of doing a sampling of some of my favorites. With that Deadpool issue, we have the appearance of the villain Arcade, who's from, I think, the X-Men universe, if I'm not mistaken. I know I've read him in a lot of X-Men stories. At any rate, it was a really fun piece or character to see in this collection. I actually really enjoyed that villain character. So it was really fun to see him in a Gwenpool story. As we get further into the run, especially by the end of that Unbelievable Gwenpool series, we have her manifesting those fourth wall breaks powers. We have her fighting an evil future version of herself. We see future versions of characters like Miles Morales, Spider-Man, things like that. Really fun story arc. We have her trying to find her brother, who she wasn't sure if he died or fell into the Marvel Universe with her. That was like a really dramatic, interesting story. And then we have her kind of fighting this idea that her series is about to be canceled, and she thinks that she is no longer going to be relevant and maybe will fade from existence. She feels like the only way she can continue to have relevancy in comic books is if she breaks bad as a villain, because presumably the audiences are much more interested when she becomes a villain, but she wants to be a hero, even if it means her own cancellation or doom, and we see kind of the heroics of this character really emerge towards the end of this run. There's a lot of really good kind of meta-narratives, humor, and a lot of heart. By the end of the Gwenpool run, I think issue 25, you're almost crying. There's so many dramatic, great moments. You really just feel for this character. You could see her good nature just kind of shine through. And I think it's just really a masterclass at a fun, modern comic. I think that this would definitely be popular with kind of teens or maybe tween-age kind of people out there. I think certainly older people can enjoy a comic like this as well. I know I'm in my early 30s, and I don't know if I was supposed to be the target demographic for this, but frankly, I really enjoyed it. There was a lot of heart, some really interesting play with fourth wall, like I said. The narrative took a lot of chances. I felt the character was really engaging and fun without really bordering into that kind of obnoxious territory that I think this could certainly become, or someone like Deadpool could become, and I really appreciated it for that. I love the initial run of this series. After that, we get into the West Coast Avengers series from Kelly Thompson. What's really cool is that run on West Coast Avengers was only 10 issues, and all of it is included in this omnibus. So in a way, it almost feels like a mini omnibus for West Coast Avengers because we have that entire run chronologically in this oversized format. A really fun addition to a Gwenpool collection. She is one of the main Avengers in that series, which is led by Kate Bishop's Hawkeye. We have Clint Barton Hawkeye on that team. We have Kate's boyfriend, who's this character who can basically become the materials that he touches, like metals and things like that. We have America Chavez on that team. We have Quentin Quire from the X-Men universe, and that really rounds out this team. We have a couple other people sort of show up, but that is sort of this West Coast Avengers team. They're a lot younger, more modern, and it was just a really interesting, eclectic group of young Marvel characters. I actually really loved Kate Bishop's character here in Hawkeye. I love the Matt Fraction run of that series, and so to have them kind of at the forefront of West Coast Avengers, it was a lot of fun. I'm also a big fan of Quentin Quire. I know I've liked seeing him in kind of the modern X-Force run recently. At any rate, it's been really fun. I think that the West Coast Avengers issues, while nice and really fun to have, some good art, some fun story arcs, I think for me, one of the things I did not love about it is how they treated Gwenpool overall. I feel like they really scaled her back and made her more kind of an ensemble piece and almost caricatured her in a way. They made her more of that zany, manic energy without really the heart that made this character, I don't want to say tolerable, but so many of the likable aspects of Gwenpool is when you got to see the compassion, the heart, and the more grounded moments of the character. It made it like tolerable and even kind of cheeky and fun when she got manic because you had that grounded, kind of solid, compassionate character core. And I feel like that aspect of Gwenpool is completely missing once we hit West Coast Avengers. I think we just have the zaniness. So that was a bit tough as far as like at this point in the run of Gwenpool 2, you've already experienced her entire solo series, so you're really grounded with her, and then you have this kind of zany energy again, and you just feel like they dialed her back, and I think it did a disservice to that character. But I certainly get why they did that on an ensemble book where there's already so many earnest, compassionate characters. We needed kind of this zany outlet, comedic relief energy. There was also sort of a love story, dysfunctional love story between Quentin Quire and Gwenpool, and I for one thought that that was really fun, just seeing those characters kind of love-hate each other was kind of fun. After the West Coast Avengers issues, we do have a couple issues of Superior Spider-Man, which is of course a Doc Ock Spider-Man series, but this ties over directly with the West Coast Avengers. They kind of team up, so it feels like a good extension and kind of epilogue to that West Coast Avengers run, and I actually found those issues to be a lot of fun. It was tying into, I think, War of the Realms, one of the bigger kind of Thor-related events. I can't remember what that one's called, but at any rate, it was a kind of an interesting tie-in to that. They were a fun couple of issues that I think was just a blast, especially if you like the West Coast Avengers characters or you enjoy Superior Spider-Man. Sometime after that, we have Gwenpool Strikes Back. It's a 5-issue mini-series. This was really fun. I think that this was trying to be a return to form for Gwenpool, but I think it just kind of missed the mark. We have a bit more substance for her, but it doesn't feel like it's on the level of what we got with Christopher Hastings' initial Unbelievable Deadpool run, which I think is really the core of this book and really the heart and soul of this book, if I'm being honest. I don't think anything really reached the peak of those issues, and I think it's a bit of a bummer that you finished them a little bit over halfway through this book, so that when you get to West Coast Avengers or Gwenpool Strikes Back, you almost feel like you're on kind of the down slope of the narrative overall. Gwenpool Strikes Back, that was a lot of fun. It's her kind of trying to stave off cancellation again and trying to be relevant and trying to squeeze out the last bit of her relevancy before she may or may not get canceled. So she's doing a lot of kind of crazy things. She's trying to get into a love triangle with Reed Richards to kind of get a scandalous vote. She tries to make herself look more scandalous for appeal, I guess. It's kind of goofy. And then there's kind of a battle royale on an island she tries to set up with all the Marvel heroes. Again, there's all these kind of weird grasps at trying to get sort of poppy and important just so that she doesn't get canceled. I think it was a pretty novel approach. I think that this is some of the better interpretations of Gwenpool in this omnibus. I think she's handled in some ways better in that Strikes Back than even West Coast Avengers. But again, it doesn't kind of reach the pinnacle of that Christopher Hastings run to me. But it was still fun and a really good inclusion. We have a couple other specials and little things after that. But that's really all of the main books we have in this omnibus. I did miss a couple plot lines just because there's so many to talk about, and I just kind of cherry-picked some of my favorites. Switching over to the art, it's absolutely stunning. I know one of the main artists on this book is Gurahiri. I think they really lend that kind of sense of manga anime feel, especially to the character model of Gwenpool, especially when she kind of has her hood off. There is kind of this rounded, soft, more cartoony aspect to that character that I feel is reminiscent of kind of those manga art styles, and it really works for a character like this. I don't know how to describe it. It just matches her personality and kind of whole vibe perfectly. I think the art is really lush and beautiful. The coloring throughout all of these books is so amazing, and the print quality that Marvel gives us, the art really jumps out of the page. And I think that alone for the art, it's just really spellbinding. It's honestly hard to look away. It's so beautiful, and all the way throughout there's such consistent art styles and artwork that I was really, really gripped by it. It was rare that I got really pulled out of the narrative from the artwork because the art was so immersive, gripping, and just fun and consistent throughout. Oh, I completely forgot things like the Edge of Venomverse, where she gets kind of the Venom symbiote. That's a really funny story where we have her crossing over and crushing on Matt Murdock's Daredevil. Really interesting toward the back of this book. The last couple little appearances of Gwenpool are definitely fascinating, but they're kind of fun and they're interesting. But anyway, this was a really great book. I think that it was better than I hoped it would be. This is definitely going to go on my shelf with my kind of comedic Marvel universe with Squirrel Girl and Howard the Duck and things like that. But I really enjoyed it, and I think the character was much more interesting than I expected her to be. Even with kind of a basic description of her, I think that there was a lot more substance here than I really appreciated just from the outside, especially in that Christopher Hastings run. I'm also happy to say at the back of this book we have a really healthy amount of extras in this omnibus. Yay, that's always such an added facet for me when I go to get these books, and especially for a character that got her start in a variant cover. I'm happy to say we have a ton of variant covers at the back of this book. There's a huge cover art gallery, and it's really just a joy. I love seeing all the different artists kind of take their shot at Gwenpool in this universe. Really, really fun. We have some other kind of behind the scenes stuff, blurbs, writings, just a really, really great collection here. Always love to see the extras, especially when they pad out a book like this. After an already really fun experience, to have all these extras, just way to go, Marvel. What a fun book. While it maybe is not the most groundbreaking series I've ever read, I was certainly entertained, and this is a book I will probably revisit, if not the whole thing, at least my favorite issues in the future and time to come. At any rate, though, that's really the end of this Gwenpool Omnibus, and I think that all that's left now is to give this book a grade. For its outstandingly gorgeous artwork throughout the entire book, coupled with some truly novel approaches to fourth wall breaking that I really have never seen replicated in fiction, the Comic Book Report is happy to give the Gwenpool Omnibus from Marvel Comics a B+. I think that there was surprisingly much more substance to this title than I gave it credit for just hearing about it, especially that Christopher Hastings Unbelievable Gwenpool run. This was absolutely a blast to read. I loved just getting to know the character of Gwenpool, her kind of quirky supporting cast, and seeing her interact with some of my favorite Marvel Comics characters. I think that there were so many plot lines and fun specials, and the inclusion of the entire West Coast Avengers run within this omnibus, it's just a real treat. We even have a ton of extras at the back. Overall, I think there's a lot of value with this omnibus. It was better than I thought, and I would recommend it to fans of kind of comedic Marvel, or maybe kind of the younger demographics or younger heroes within the Marvel universe. But let me know what you think of Gwenpool in the comments, and until next time, this has been the Comic Book Report. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to leave your like and comment, and have a good one.